Of course, we should ban kitty and libel and personal threats and calls for insurrection. That's a no-brainer because they're already illegal. Just as it would be illegal in an actual town square to whip out
The left loves to paint itself as the moral compass of America. Righteous, informed, and always on the right side of history. But Bill Maher, he's not buying it. Despite being a lifelong liberal, Maher has become the left's biggest headache, calling out the hypocrisy and delusion eating his own side alive. He says the once noble liberal movement has traded truth for tribalism and reason for rage. Bold claim maybe, but wait till you hear what he says. It's the kind of truth bomb that makes the so-called truth police scramble for cover.
believe any of it. Not right away, not until I check it out. And when I ask, is it true? Usually the answer turns out to be, well, sort of. Or yes, but yeah. See, we've all become very adept at saying things that are technically true but lack context, or that leave out half the story. So if we're gonna ban untruth, does that include the half-truth, the quarter-truth? And wait, don't the wokest people in the world believe that what really matters is your truth?
Yeah, I'm with MR on this one. If the left wants to be the self-appointed truth police, then we've got to ask, what kind of truth are they really policing? Is it the kind that challenges power or the kind that protects it because it's easy to champion truth when it flatters your beliefs, fuels your agenda, and makes you look righteous? But the real test comes when that same truth cuts the other way. When it pokes holes in your ideology, your leaders, or your sacred narratives. That's when most people suddenly lose their appetite for honesty. Maher's point is simple yet devastating. Truth isn't supposed to be partisan. You can't call yourself the defender of facts while censoring or ridiculing the ones that make you uncomfortable. Either you stand for truth across the board, or you're just managing propaganda with better PR.
Of course, we should ban kitty libel and personal threats and calls for insurrection. That's a no-brainer because they're already illegal. Just as it would be illegal in an actual town square to whip out
Left often boasts about policing truth, proudly banning obvious lies, conspiracy theories, and criminal content. Sure, that's the easy part. Nobody's arguing in favor of misinformation or illegal activity. But that's not where the real battle lies. The real danger comes when truth itself is twisted, filtered, or selectively edited to fit a political narrative. When facts are cherry-picked to protect an ideology or silence dissent. That's not truth policing, it's truth manipulation. And Maher's been calling it out for years. He sees how the left has shifted from defending open debate to enforcing ideological conformity. They're not just debunking falsehoods anymore. They're deciding what version of the truth the public gets to see. And that right there is the most dangerous kind of censorship. The one disguised as moral virtue carried out in the name of protecting people from ideas they're perfectly capable of judging for themselves.
Should it be in the digital town square? And so should bots and deep fakes be banned and anything else that aren't really the people who say they are. But that's an entirely different thing than actual people expressing an opinion as repugnant or offensive or as misguided as some opinions may be. This is still America. Where people have the right to express what they think, including to be wrong, to lie, and yes, the right to be an And if you think you know everything and no one else could possibly have some other truth, you should be glad for that protection, because you're an
This is America, the land where freedom of speech isn't just a right. It's the cornerstone of democracy. It's what separates open societies from authoritarian ones. Everyone should be allowed to speak their mind, no matter how controversial or unpopular their opinion might be. But that freedom also comes with responsibility. Others have the equal right to challenge, debate, and fact-check those claims. That's how truth is tested and refined, through open dialogue, not enforced silence. Yes, it's a delicate balance. Too much control and you slide into censorship, too little and chaos takes over. But here's the thing. Free speech isn't supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be honest, raw, and sometimes messy. The moment we start silencing voices in the name of protection, we lose the very essence of what makes America free, the right to think, speak, and disagree without fear.
percent of Democrats last year believed the hospitalization rate if you got COVID unvaccinated was over 50%, when it was actually less than 1%. Somebody's misinformation got to those people. Sometimes misinformation is just history's first draft. I see a lot of things on social media, and also on old fucks media.
Maher isn't pulling punches when it comes to the DNC's handling of COVID. In his words, the party that preached trust, the science was often peddling selective truths instead. He slammed the misinformation that surrounded vaccine reporting. How anyone who questioned the mandate was instantly branded as ignorant, selfish, or even dangerous. During the pandemic, mainstream outlets flooded the public with terrifying statistics claiming the unvaccinated were filling hospitals in droves. But Maher says the data tells a very different story. According to him, the numbers were exaggerated to push compliance and shame to centers. In reality, less than 1% of those who refused the jab ended up hospitalized. That's not just a correction. It's a revelation that flips the entire narrative on its head. And for Maher, it's yet another example of why blind trust in political messaging is a recipe for mass D.
Story that more effectively captures what's wrong with today's journalism than the sad saga of what happened last week at the Washington Post. They need to keep it to themselves because it would be too depressing. If you missed it, the Washington Post recently got embroiled in a self-inflicted shitstorm when one of their best reporters, David Weigel, retweeted this joke. Every girl is bi. You just have to figure out if it's polar or proving it is a joke. Thank you. The comedian who actually wrote the tweet called it a banal throwaway joke, which is exactly what it is. Throwaway, as in if you don't like it, throw it away. For eons, both sexes have made jokes about how the other is crazy, and no one but the perpetually offended thinks it means anything more than that the sexes get frustrated over how differently we each see the world. And yes, we relieve some of that frustration with humor and scene.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. The woke crowd seems perpetually offended by everything. Nothing is safe anymore. A harmless joke, a classic poem, or even a decades-old movie suddenly becomes problematic because someone decides it doesn't align with today's ever-shifting moral code. It's like walking through a cultural minefield where intent doesn't matter. Only interpretation does. Comedy, once the last refuge for free expression, has taken the hardest hit. Comedians now second-guess every line, terrified of being labeled insensitive or cancelled over a punchline. Yet, despite the backlash and the fact that most Americans are tired of this outrage circus, the woke crusaders won't back down. They keep pushing, trying to sanitize humor and rewrite the boundaries of what's acceptable. But here's the irony, they've achieved little more than proving Maher's point. When everything's offensive, nothing's funny, and the truth becomes the ultimate taboo.
Weigel pulled down his retweet and wrote, "I apologize and did not mean to cause any harm," and that was the end of that. I'm joking, of course. The unlicensed daycare center that is today's newsroom went. You see, the Post has another writer named Felicia Sonmez, and she's a lot. For example, she tweeted about Kobe Bryant's 2003 rape trial hours after his helicopter crashed. And despite the fact that she says Dave Weigel is a good friend, she resurrected the tweet he had taken down with a screenshot and demanded to know what the Post was going to do about this unacceptable evil that must not be allowed to stand. Sarcastically writing, "Fantastic to work at a news outlet where tweets like this are allowed." Yes, can you imagine a world that allows jokes you don't like?
The most infuriating thing about cancel culture is that it never stops at an apology. You can delete the tweet, issue a heartfelt statement, and bend over backward to make amends, but it doesn't matter. The mob isn't after remorse, it's after ruin. Once they've decided you're guilty, their mission is to erase you completely. They go for your job, your reputation, your income, even your family. Nothing is off limits. One misinterpreted joke or decade-old post can spiral into a full-blown witch hunt, amplified by social media outrage and virtue signaling. It's not about accountability anymore. It's about dominance. It's about proving who controls the narrative and who gets silenced. And that's what Maher keeps warning about. When outrage becomes a sport and forgiveness becomes extinct, society stops progressing. It just eats itself alive, one cancelled person at a time.
Leadership at the Post folded like a Miami condo, and suspended Weigel without pay for a month and denounced the offending retweet as a gross violation of their values, free speech apparently not being one of them. Then a third Post reporter offered up the idea, of course on Twitter, because why do anything privately, that, hey, maybe everyone was overreacting and we should all just calm down. And then it was really on. Felicia demanded that the Post discipline him and tweeted about that. I assume she's tweeting about this right now.
And this is exactly why cancel culture needs to be stopped. It doesn't know when or where to draw the line. What begins as a call for accountability quickly mutates into a full-blown crusade against anyone who dares to think differently. It's never enough to condemn the original offender. The mob also targets anyone who defends them, questions the outrage, or even stays silent. Guilt by association becomes the new law of the land. Before long, the cancel crowd is digging through years of posts trying to destroy careers, reputations, and livelihoods. It's a cycle of moral hysteria that feeds on fear. People stop speaking their minds, not because they're wrong, but because they're terrified of being next. And that's the real danger. It turns society into a self-censoring echo chamber where intimidation replaces dialogue and public shaming becomes the new form of control.
She raged with the fire of 1,000 burning sending a gazillion tweets calling for more to be done against Weigel, mocking her bosses, attacking colleagues, and letting the world know how much the Washington Post sucked. And this endless bickering and infighting continued online in public view until the bell rang and they all went to 7th period. Now, note that I haven't yet told you what age Felicia Sonmez and her quarreling co-workers are. Why? Because I didn't have to. Because you can't imagine someone my age acting like this in an office.
The woke crowd doesn't seem to care that people make mistakes, that humans grow, evolve, and learn. To them, one wrong opinion or poorly worded joke from years ago is enough to define you forever. There's no room for context, no space for redemption. They ignore the simple truth that as we age and experience more of the world, our perspectives naturally shift. What someone said at 20 doesn't always reflect who they are at 40. But in the eyes of the outrage brigade, personal growth doesn't matter. All that matters is moral purity in the present moment. It's as if they've forgotten that change is the very essence of humanity. We are meant to rethink, to mature, to become better versions of ourselves. Yet, the woke crowd acts like evolution is a crime and forgiveness a weakness. Mars, right? This obsession with permanent punishment is exhausting and deeply un-American.
Just ran an op-ed entitled, "Why Are We Still Governed by Baby Boomers?" This is why. Because too many millennials are overly sensitive, overly fragile, and have no sense of priorities. You know, I'm sure many boomers would love to retire, but they can't. They're like the grandmother who'd much rather be watching Judge Judy, but has to raise her grandkids because her own kids are to manage it.
At the end of the day, Maher's message is simple but powerful. Truth shouldn't depend on political affiliation, and freedom of speech isn't negotiable. The left's growing obsession with moral policing, cancel culture, and approved truths is doing more harm than good. When people fear speaking honestly, society loses its ability to think critically. Comedy dies, discussion fades, and all that's left is conformity. Maher might not be everyone's favorite voice, but he's one of the few. Still brave enough to call out his own side. He reminds us that the moment truth becomes partisan, it ceases to be truth at all. Real progress doesn't come from silencing dissent. It comes from facing uncomfortable facts and allowing people to grow. That's the America we need back. One that values dialogue over dogma, forgiveness over fury, and truth over tribal loyalty. And this brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for